it's actually quite confrontational to address this. And the worst part about this conspiracy is that it's real. And it takes energy to address this. It takes energy to confront the reality that your life has been decided for you against your will without your consent. And that most of the things you believe are engineered. How do I know this? Well, at a certain point I realized that the reality around me was being chosen for me, and that I was meant to be given a program that I didn't actually accept or rejected. You see, I was raised in essentially a single mother household, basically as an only child, and that came with its issues. And if you look at what is known about the parents of the children of single parent, single mother households, it's really not good. The outcomes are typically higher amounts of crime, higher amounts of homosexuality, perpetuation of broken families, inability to commit to families, low ability to commit to anything in life, and essentially the perpetuation of the devouring mother archetype. Now, the programming didn't take for me. So I started to get a bit of a schism, a break between what she was telling me was real and then what was actually real for me. I had to start figuring out who I was on my own right. So that actually carried through into a lot of other areas of life where I no longer just accepted the status quo. I no longer accepted what was told to me as truth. In fact, without even realizing it, I took a contrarian position on just about everything that was told to me. I was very anti-authoritarian as a result of this. And it would take a fair amount of substantiation and evidence for me to see that someone was telling the truth. As well as that, I also just, even if I didn't believe it was a lie, I tended to just reject the program that was given to me because I didn't see it as effective. I didn't see myself as who it was designed for or intended for. I didn't identify as it being relevant. And what I'm going to talk about today is actually going to delve into the different facets of our mind, our worldview, what's creating it, why there is a battlefield for our consciousness, for what we believe, why what we believe shapes our reality. And this is not some woo-woo manifestation stuff. This is just basic human psychology that has been exploited. It's actually quite confrontational to address this. And the worst part about this conspiracy is that it's real. And it takes energy to address this. It takes energy to confront the reality that your life has been decided for you against your will without your consent. And that most of the things you believe are engineered. And that you have a spark of free will which has been dampened and controlled and manipulated by forces that have plans that existed long before you were born. We have to deal with and contend with principalities in high places. Okay? Okay, so we all have this filter that essentially shapes our reality. It's called the Reticular Activation System. So the Reticular Activation System is one of the most important functions of the brain. All right? The reticular activation system is a neural network in the brain stem that filters out and filters all of the sensory inputs from this world and determines what becomes of our conscious experience based on all of that. You see, we're not actually experiencing reality in a direct way. We're experiencing a filtered reality. So basically, the brain is like this supercomputer that receives about 11 million bits per second of data from all of your environment. You see, that's made up of all of the things you can taste, touch, hear, smell, see. All right, there is an absolute barrage, a blitzkrieg of data entering into our brain at every second. All right, and the conscious part of our mind can only process about 40 bits per second. All right, so we're dealing with 11 million bits coming in, and only 40 bits we can actually interpret as reality of what is going on. All right, so that means that about 99.9% of reality is it's like this blurry peripheral mess that we actually can't really focus on. We've got this one little piece of aperture of reality that we can deal with at any one given time. All right, and so our RAS, our reticular activation system, decides what we're going to be seeing before we see it. So it gets filtered in, and the RAS determines what is actually relevant to pay attention to, and in what context to pay attention to it before we've even seen it. All of this happens in milliseconds. Okay, so your worldview interprets events before you consciously experience them. Okay, so the reticular activation system actually is made up and is programmed by our worldview, our beliefs. Okay, so our beliefs determine the world that we're actually seeing around us before we even see it. Okay, so this is why things like cognitive dissonance, where you've got essentially programmed blind spots that are there to protect your worldview, are so real and impactful. So, you know, we're literally seeing through a belief-shaped filter. You can tell this is true. A little experiment, you might have heard of this, is the red car experiment. If I was to tell you that I was going to give you $50 for every red car you saw over the next 24 hours, you better believe that you're going to see a heck of a lot of them. If I was to ask you how many red cars you saw in the last 24 hours or week, you'd have no idea, because that information is not relevant. Okay, so the reticular activation system is determining what sensory data is relevant to your survival, and that's how that's working. Another one, so like that's for noticing something, that example. There's another study, the famous invisible gorilla study, where 50% of participants failed to see a man in a gorilla suit because their RAS, that in the study, that they were told to focus on watching for these basketball passes. So they're told to watch for something, and they don't see, like half the people didn't see the guy in the gorilla suit. So something that would otherwise be glaringly obvious goes right past you. It goes completely undetected. This is how a lot of illusionists and magicians work, is by telling you to focus on this and doing this, doing something basically in plain sight, but have you hyper-focused on something. You know, sometimes you could go looking for something in your fridge or around the house, and because you're focused so intently on finding it, and maybe the emotions around having lost it, you can't see or even perceive of the places you might be, where the thing might actually be. You might be looking right past it. You might be looking so hard that you can't even see what's right in front of you. That's how the RAS works. Okay, so we're not these infallible, all-seeing, perceptive, omnipotent beings that are just seeing reality for what it is. But that's kind of how it feels. It feels like we're all seeing reality for how it is, and that everything we see is real. but there are so many stages before it even gets to the point of perception that matter. All right? So your beliefs shape your filter, your reticular activation system. Your filter shapes your perception of what you can actually see of what's happening around you. Your perception shapes your decisions because you can only act and decide based on what information you have in front of you. And your decisions shape your destiny, shape your actions, and your actions are what is real. So through this filter of abstraction, you know, something like your abstract belief system then converts into physical, tangible reality, because your actions are everything at the end of the day. Your actions are the final step in manifesting physical reality and shaping your destiny. So your beliefs are your reality, whether they're true or not. Okay? So the belief that creates reality behaviorally okay, so now you might be thinking this is all a bit of like woo-woo, you know, your thoughts are, you know, see it, believe it, achieve it, man. The thing is, there are real immutable laws of reality. Like there is real reality. There is such thing as gravity. There is such thing as sexual dimorphism. There is such thing as the law of thermodynamics, meaning you can't just eat nothing forever, and you can't generate energy from nothing. There is the reality that we're all going to die. There are real hard, immutable facts and laws of reality. And I will go into talking about what those are in another video. But there's an objective reality and then there's a subjective reality. And essentially, it doesn't matter if the subjective reality is not based on objective reality. Because if our perception of it basically makes it real. Okay, so a delusional person will experience false beliefs as true, regardless of whether or not they're true. All right, you know, the crazy guy muttering to himself down the street, that's as real as anything for him. All right, when you're in a dream and you're experiencing the dream, you're not thinking, oh, this is fake, this is corny. You know, you're not suspending your disbelief. You're just experiencing the dream as it is. Our experience of reality is very real, because that's really all we've got at the end of the day. And even our experience of what we see as objective reality is still a subjective interpretation through the RAS. So even though someone might be delusional or perceive reality different to what is like factually immutable and true, like the truest it can be, it might as well not matter if that's what they truly believe and that's how they see it. All right, so the beliefs shape reality. They shape our decisions and our choices. If you can convince someone that there's a hole in the floor and they move around it, then they might as well have been a hole in the floor. All right, and if you act according to that belief long enough, then your whole life reflects that belief. So the beliefs are important, okay? Now, the interesting part is these beliefs can be manipulated. They can be controlled. They can be implanted. And I'm going to talk about that. So where do our beliefs actually come from? All right, there's a few different ways they come through and some important context that makes this relevant. So one of the big ones is we get our beliefs from our environment, from authority figures, from people we perceive to be important, and then that's reinforced by the group. So this happens even at an age before we can talk. Okay, so we imitate before we can think. This guy Bandura did a study. He's one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, and he's basically the guy that figured out all of the social learning theories and what we understand about observational learning, modeling, self-efficacy. All right, so he found that humans learn by watching, imitating, receiving reward and punishment, observing authority figures, internalizing group norms, and all of this happens before reasoning, conscious choice, and critical thinking happens. All right, so this means that we're getting our program before we even have the ability to interpret our own program. So we are inheriting this from our parents, from our worldview. We're inheriting our worldview from our parents and our environment before we can even consciously decide what is happening and what is being created in our mind. All right, so children adopt behaviors and beliefs simply by watching adults, and then people adopt norms subconsciously by watching behaviors, and that matters a lot based on how they determine that person, like what kind of context they put that person in. So authority figures, when someone's speaking with a suit on, or they have a collar and a tie, like there's these subconscious things that signal authority and mean that information has more relevance to the receiver. And all of these decisions are made subconsciously, without our choice. All right, so that's one example. Okay, so by the time you're 7, 90% of your worldview has been modeled and given to you and installed, not specifically chosen. So they're basically hand-me-downs. All right, where did your parents get their beliefs from? Well, they probably had the same thing happen to them, didn't they? There's another experiment done by Ash and reinforced by Dunbar. So these are the conformity experiments. So Solomon Ash is an American psychologist who studied social pressure, which is a really interesting thing. Okay, so participants were placed in a room with actors pretending to be other participants. Actors intentionally gave the wrong answers to simple visual questions, and the participants had to answer after them. All right, so like an example would be, like, say what's on the card. Everyone, they get the card held up and it's an orange, but they say it's an apple. All right, what they found is that 75% of the participants conformed at least once to the obvious lie because of the social pressure. They wanted to uphold social coherence. 75% of people wouldn't say a basic reality, a basic fact of what they were seeing, because other people had, like the majority of people had committed to the lie. That's really weird and bizarre, isn't it? And it's also kind of pathetic, if you ask me. All right, so we've got, look, I get it. The thing is, we're hardwired to conform to the group because the essentially our place in the group is more important for survival than the truth in a lot of ways. And not that the truth isn't important, but it's like in a hierarchy of imperatives for survival, that the acceptance of the group comes before the truth. And that's why it's rare for people who, it's less common for people to put the truth above that. It takes a different kind of person to want to do that. This is just one of those flaws or, features of our minds that gets exploited. So, we'll conform repeatedly to lies just because everyone else is doing it. Think of that thing that happened a few years ago, right around 2020. How many people actually wanted that thing? How many people actually needed that thing? How many people regret getting that thing? How many people got that thing just because they thought everyone else was getting that thing? And then all the levels of social pressure that applied to them to get that thing. All right. This guy Dunbar, an anthropologist, did a lot of research explaining how we're evolved for group survival. Acceptance equals safety. Rejection is dangerous. So therefore, conformity is more important than accuracy. All right. Now, the next one, Edward Bernays, who was, I think, Freud's nephew. He's the father of modern propaganda. All right. So he's the architect of modern advertising and political PR. All right. So if you go to university, get a PR degree, advertising all of these like psychological based degrees, you're essentially working from his work. All right, you're getting his magnum opus. Worked with governments, corporations, intelligence services. All right, Bernays applied psychoanalysis to mass persuasion, using emotional triggers, identity manipulation, symbolic anchoring, repetition. Repetition's really important. You'll see that comes up quite often. Repetition is one of the main effects of installing a belief system. Things happen not just once, but the groove must be greased. And essentially managing public opinion. So he was one of the first guys in modern history, anyway, to be like a belief architect and to give a system of becoming a belief architect or a social architect. Okay, so those who, I think this is a quote from him, those who understand the mechanisms of the group mind can control the masses without their knowledge. All right, so this is a guy that's like, installed the belief, has like, we're using his work, and his work is being used against us in the modern day world. All right, so Bernays openly states that your beliefs are designed, your worldview is engineered, your identity is nudged by those who organize your opinions, and essentially your whole worldview is programmable. Not only is it programmable, but it's also profitable, and there's a vested interest in choosing your program. All right, there are people out there and groups out there that have existed for hundreds, thousands of years, even, that have vested interests and long-term plans. We're born into short-term plans. We don't even have plans. Most people don't even think 12 months into the future. And yet, we're born into plans and prophecies that have been around for 100, 200, 1,000 years. All right, so yeah, it's a bit of an unfair advantage they've got here. So intergenerational power comes from having a plan that outlives a generation of people. And most people aren't born into a family that has any kind of direction, where the grandparents, set something in motion that the parents are now doing. Like, the closest thing we have to that is a family business, which is very rare these days. There's a few out there, but like a family business or a company that has existed for 100 years or more, like, that's the only examples of plebs having an intergenerational plan. Or at least a business has its own destiny and future, and something that each generation can come on board with. But the thing is, we're born into a world that has plans for us. All right, so there's dynastic wealth where families or aristocracies have plans to maintain their power, maintain their position. All right. There's institutions, there's ideological movements, there's also occult and esoteric circles that are interfacing with principalities in high places, and they have plans for us as well. So, it's hard to say that there's like just one very organized group that has a plan for everything. There are multiple factions of groups that have plans for us, but the average person is part of the plan unwittingly, okay? And we don't have access to the tools that they have. Right? We're not brought up to speed. We're given a program that our parents are given, all right? And that's just constantly perpetuated. Most of the time when these social engineers or these societal engineers want to make moves, they have to think 2, 3, 4, 5 generations ahead, and their plans can be so effective that they're essentially inevitable, because humans are so predictable when you understand the mechanisms of action behind how we believe and how we act. Okay, so what I'm trying to say to you here is there are real mechanisms that affect how we behave and our beliefs are programmable, our behavior is programmable, and we're not in the driver's seat of creating and shaping our own reality. Most people can't think a few months ahead, let alone 100 years. So this has been used for a long time, but there's essentially a newer creation of like a system of magic called chaos magic. All right, and chaos magic is essentially psychology combined with symbolism, emotion, and then put on repeat to create a behavioral change. So it's it's essentially like leveraging the psychological factors of adapting to change. Chaos magic first came out basically as a neutral tool for people to formulate their own systems of belief to then create their own behavioral change to then create aspects of reality. And then, this could be created or this could be, discarded once the outcome had been achieved. All right. So, but the thing is, the elites have been using these systems of belief against us well before this idea of chaos magic even was created. But it's just interesting that there's a system that you could use that in your own hands would be effective, but if you're not using it, then it's being used against you. All right, so it's used in advertising, political slogans, corporate branding, ideological mantras, news cycles, and even mimetic warfare, meme warfare. That's right, CIA creates memes. There are elites that create memes and give things the appearance of organic formation, but they're actually being we're actually being engineered. We're constantly being engineered, and we have to keep fighting off and taking charge of our own worldview. All right, so free will is a spiritual battlefield. All right, so if our beliefs were installed in us, then how much free will do we have? We have been given the potential for free will. All right, so free will does exist, at least in the realm of potential, but only when we are conscious of the choices we are making. Only when we are conscious of what options we have. So the will to choose implies that you know what you're choosing from and against. It knows what you're choosing, knows what your options are. If you don't know what your options are, then you're not exactly free, are you? We live in prisons that have been constructed for us, and a prison of the mind translates to a prison of reality. Now, I'm not getting Gnostic here and saying that we're living in in some created world by a demiurge, but on a more sort of down-to-earth level, we kind of are. All right? I don't believe God is benevolent, but there are forces that essentially act like a demiurge or archons that are alive and living and are real people and institutions and families that are controlling what we can think and experience and what we can choose as a result of that. So we are created. We are not some accidental cosmic mess that just happened to just come out of nowhere and exists for no reason or purpose. We were created by a benevolent creator for a purpose, and that purpose is co-creating with our Lord. That is evident by the fact that we can produce offspring, that we can have sex with a woman, or, a man and a woman can come together and create a child, co-create that child with God. They combine their genetic blueprints and form the body, and God provides the soul. That is a miracle. We are co-creators in this life with God. We are born for creation. But creation is an extension of life. When we are not conscious and we are kept in boxed in realms of reality, then we can't create outside of that realm. And our choices are limited. So free will exists, but only when it's activated with the awareness, with full consciousness. Now here's the thing, there's part of this war on our consciousness is actually a war on our vitality. Because free will takes energy. All right? It takes energy to actually be able to perceive more of the world around us. The more tired you are, the less you perceive. All right? The more tired and the less energy you have, the more your world starts shrinking and getting smaller. The more your priorities change to the bare necessities. All right? So vitality is a measure of your creation. Your creation ability is a measure of your vitality. And your consciousness is a measure of your vitality. So part of the drive to keep you stuck, part of the plan to keep you stuck and conforming into a plan that is not yours, is to keep you sick and tired, so that you don't actually have the energy to think outside of the realm that you've been placed in. These principalities in high places want to keep you in lower places. And if you were to create your own destiny, you would need to have the energy to do so and the conscious awareness to conceive of an idea of a reality that you're going to create. Now, in order for this to work, it needs to be in alignment with God's will. All right? You were created with an intention, as is evident in the fact that we are all unique and different. We are all given gifts and talents and maybe some weaknesses and limitations. But we are created with love and we are created with intention. And our ultimate destiny, which is our free will, is one that we create in accordance with God, in alignment with God, but still by our own volition and free will. You see, we need free will in order to manifest our destiny. We need consciousness. We need energy to be able to have consciousness, to be able to create anything. Otherwise, it's all created for us and we are just fumbling along, consuming our whole life, consuming, suffering, being toyed with in whatever way these principalities, and let's just actually maybe call them what they are. You know, that there are real energetic beings that exist, spirits that exist, that have plans for you that are not God's plan. And when we're bound to addictions and vices, we are playing out someone else's will, not our own. Our own weaknesses are the stronghold of demons. That's pretty intense, isn't it? I know. It's pretty out there. But anyone who has experienced addiction will know that there's a spirit that can come over you. It compels you to do something you don't want to do, that you know isn't good for you, that you know isn't right for you, that you don't want to create, but you feel smaller than. All right, there are real spiritual forces that we are contending with. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about this in a series. So the next episode will be discussing how we are created. We are not an accident. All right, that there are features to our build that we can actually learn how to use and how to create. All right. But for now, what you really need is awareness. You can audit your own beliefs. Go get a pen and paper and write down all the things that you believe strongly. And this might take a bit of time, but start stating the obvious. Start stating, what you believe about God, what you believe about anything, really. Stop taking for granted that everything is just how it is, and try to really explore your own consciousness and ask yourself a series of questions to evoke your beliefs onto a piece of paper. And then evaluate where you got those beliefs from. Ask yourself, with everything that you can write down, why do I believe that? It's pretty interesting, you might come to. What you might find is that there might be one or two, like you might have had someone tell you this. You might have had someone tell you something that led to that belief, and because of the social context, you took it for granted. You might have some experiences that have aligned with that. But whatever it is, I want you to start by mapping out your worldview and auditing why it is you believe those things, where you got those beliefs from. That's the first step, okay? Thank you for listening today, and I will be back. In the meantime, stay vital and start becoming conscious of your reality, of who you are and why you are.